I wasn't supposed to notice her. At least, not like that. She was just another customer at the shop, an older woman with a stubborn expression, the kind you learn not to argue with when you've spent enough time fixing what other people break. She had walked in with her car keys clutched too tightly, shoulders squared like she was ready for a fight. And she gave me one the moment I offered to take a look. "Leave me alone," she said flatly, as though kindness was something she couldn't afford to waste. I should have stepped back. I almost did. But the words left my mouth before I had time to measure them. "Only if you stop living in my thoughts." It wasn't a line. God knows I don't have lines. It just slipped out. And it hung there between us, heavier than it should have, while the sound of tools clinking in the back made the silence louder. She froze for half a second where I caught something crack through the armor of her face. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition. Then, she blinked it away and looked past me, as if I hadn't spoken at all. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The shop smelled of grease and stale coffee. The radio was humming something low and forgettable. I pretended to check her car's intake form just to buy myself more time. She tapped her nails against the counter, slow, measured taps that betrayed more impatience than she'd admit. Her voice came again, softer this time, though still laced with warning. "Just fix it. That's all." She could have left it there. But she didn't. She stayed, leaning against the counter, eyes skimming the scattered invoices pinned to the wall like she was searching for something to occupy herself with. Most customers dropped their keys and walked out. She lingered, and I noticed everything I wasn't supposed to. The faint streak of silver cutting through her dark hair. The way her blouse sleeves were rolled up, deliberate, like she hated fuss. The tightness in her jaw, a tension that seemed older than today. I wanted to ask her something. Anything, to stretch that thread of silence thinner. Instead, I blurted, "You always this defensive, or am I just special?" Her eyes cut back to me, sharp, but then softened, just barely. "Both," she said. I busied myself under the hood, though the engine didn't need my full attention. I could feel her presence behind me, the faint scrape of her heels shifting on the concrete floor. Once, when I glanced up, she was already watching me. She didn't look away right away either. That pause, God, that pause, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't name. I tightened the last bolt slower than necessary, just to delay handing the car back. My hands were steady, but my thoughts weren't. Finally, I straightened, wiping grease onto a rag. "It's running smoother now. Shouldn't give you any trouble for a while." She nodded, clipped, but her hand brushed the counter when she reached for her keys. A small, accidental sweep that came close to mine. Close enough that for a flicker of a second, I thought she might not pull back. But she did. And then she smiled. Not wide, not warm. Just the smallest, fleeting curve, like she hadn't meant to let it out at all. She turned and walked out without another word, leaving the shop door's bell to jangle behind her. But that smile is the reason I can't stop replaying the moment. She came back 3 days later. Not for her car, it was fine. She said she'd left her sunglasses in the glove box, though I knew from the way she avoided my eyes that it was only half the truth. I didn't question it. I just handed her the keys and tried not to smile too much when she lingered in the doorway instead of heading straight out to the lot. The shop was quieter that afternoon. No clatter of wrenches, no blaring radio. Just the low hum of a fan and the sun spilling through the grimy windows, cutting gold lines across the concrete floor. She stood there like she wasn't sure if leaving was the right move. Her arms folded loosely, not defensive this time. More like she was holding herself together. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes snapped up, sharp again, though softer around the edges. That's a rude thing to say to a woman. I scratched at my jaw, embarrassed. I didn't mean it like that. Just, you seem like you've had a long week. Something flickered in her expression. Hesitation, maybe, or the kind of weariness people only show when they're too drained to hide it. She laughed, but it wasn't a polished laugh. It broke halfway, rough at the edges, like it hadn't been used in a while. "Long week," she repeated, shaking her head. "More like a long year." I wanted to ask her about it, but the words stalled in my throat. Instead, I noticed the way her fingers toyed with the strap of her bag, restless, like she was trying to anchor herself. Her nails were neatly kept, but the skin along her knuckles looked dry, like someone who worked harder than she admitted. "You always keep people waiting like this?" she asked suddenly, tilting her head toward me. I blinked. "What do you mean? You're staring at me instead of getting back to your work." Heat crawled up my neck. I busied myself by wiping down the counter, though there wasn't a spot on it. "Maybe I just like good company," I muttered. She didn't respond right away, and when I glanced back, she was smiling, small, fleeting, the kind that never fully reached her eyes but softened her face in a way that made it impossible to look away. For a moment, I thought she might actually say something real, something unguarded. Her lips parted like the words were there, waiting. But then she pressed them together again, as if she'd caught herself. "I should go," she said, her voice quieter than before. She brushed past me on her way to the door, her sleeve grazing my arm. It was barely contact, but it sent a spark racing under my skin, sharp and undeniable. She didn't look back, just pushed open the door and stepped into the light. But the ghost of her touch, that stayed long after she left. It was raining hard that evening, the kind of rain that drowns out your own thoughts. The shop had closed an hour earlier, but I was still there, finishing paperwork. I didn't expect anyone to come in, which made the sound of the bell above the door sharp and startling. It was her, soaked around the shoulders, hair damp, jacket clutched too tightly. My wipers stopped working on the drive," she said, voice uneven. I couldn't see a thing. I nodded, motioning her inside, away from the downpour. "Leave the keys. I'll take a look." She didn't step back outside, though. She stayed, hovering near the counter, rainwater dripping from her sleeve onto the floor. Something about her posture felt different, less like she wanted to argue, more like she wanted to hide. "Rough night?" I asked gently. She gave a short laugh, hollow and tired. "You could say that." Then her phone lit up in her hand. She looked at it, thumb hesitating over the screen before she turned it face down without answering. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't need to. The way she pressed her lips together told me enough. Someone she didn't want to deal with. I ducked under the hood of her car, listening to the patter of rain against the roof, trying to keep my thoughts from running where they shouldn't. But when I came back inside to tell her it was a quick fix, she was still there, sitting on the old stool by the counter, head resting against her palm. She looked younger like that. Tired, but softer. "You ever feel like you spend your whole life holding everything together, only to realize you don't even know why anymore?" she asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. It wasn't meant for me. Not really. It was one of those things people say when they forget they're not alone. I swallowed. "Yeah, more than I'd like to admit." Her eyes lifted to mine then, a flicker of surprise at my honesty. The air between us thickened, like we'd both stepped too close to something neither of us was supposed to touch. I moved to hand her the keys, and for a moment, our fingers brushed. Just a second too long to be an accident. She didn't pull away right away. Neither did I. Her phone buzzed again on the counter, loud in the silence. She jerked back like the sound had broken whatever spell we'd stumbled into. I should go," she said, gathering herself quickly. Her voice was steady again, guarded. I nodded, though my chest felt tight. "Drive safe. The wipers will hold." She gave me a look then, something unreadable, lingering, almost like she wanted to say more. But she didn't. The door closed behind her, leaving only the rain and the echo of almost. And I stood there, keys still warm from her hand, wondering what might have happened if her phone had stayed silent. The shop was empty except for us. It was late, later than either of us should have been there. I was closing up when she stopped by. No car trouble this time. No excuse about lost sunglasses. She just appeared in the doorway like she'd been walking past and couldn't keep herself from stepping in. "You're still here," she said, her voice carrying that mix of surprise and relief I couldn't untangle. "Paperwork," I muttered, though most of it was already done. She didn't move toward me. She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching me in silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest until you can't breathe normally anymore. I set my pen down, too aware of her eyes. "Why are you here?" The question slipped out rougher than I intended. She hesitated. Then, with a small exhale, said, I don't know. That honesty, it hit harder than if she'd given me 100 excuses. For a while, neither of us spoke. The clock ticked on the wall. Somewhere outside, a car drove by, tires hissing against wet pavement. Inside, it was just her eyes on mine, steady, unflinching. "What are we doing?" she asked finally, the words cutting through the silence like a blade. I couldn't answer right away. My throat tightened, my hands suddenly restless. I wanted to say nothing, that we were doing nothing, that it was harmless. But my chest burned with the truth. We were already too deep for that lie. "I don't know," I said, almost in a whisper. She let out a faint laugh, bitter, broken at the edges. "You're too young to be tangled up in whatever this is." I flinched. "You think I don't know what I want?" Her gaze softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. "You think I don't see the way you look at me? Like I'm some answer you haven't even figured out the question for." I didn't deny it. Couldn't. My silence said everything. Her arms dropped to her sides. She took a step closer, slow, deliberate. The air felt charged, fragile, like one wrong word could shatter it. We were only a few feet apart now, close enough that I could see the faint crease at the corner of her mouth, the way her chest rose and fell too quickly. I searched for something, anything, to anchor the moment. But all I managed was, "Why does it scare you?" Her lips parted, then closed. Her eyes glistened, not tears, not yet, but the threat of them. "Because," she said, her voice raw, "if I let myself want this, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." The silence that followed was heavier than any touch could have been. And for the first time, I realized I was the only one holding myself back. She didn't usually linger after closing, but that night she did. No storm outside, no broken wipers, no excuse. Just her, sitting on the old stool by the counter, tracing the rim of a paper coffee cup I'd offered but she hadn't touched. Her silence wasn't the guarded kind this time. It was heavier, as if she was searching for the right place to set something down. I leaned against the workbench, trying not to push, trying not to break whatever fragile thread kept her there. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly. Her eyes stayed fixed on the untouched coffee, voice steady but low. "Who?" She hesitated, the kind of pause that feels longer than it is. Then, "My brother." The words caught me off guard. I hadn't expected that. He was younger than me, full of restless energy, always chasing things he couldn't quite hold on to. She gave a faint smile, though it wavered. "He died when he was 26. The number hung between us, sharp and unkind. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reach out, close the space between us, but my hands stayed at my sides. "I'm sorry," I managed. She nodded once, as if she'd already rehearsed the response. But her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw her not as the confident, guarded woman who'd kept me at arm's length, but as someone carrying a loss too heavy to name out loud. "I keep thinking," she said, her voice almost breaking, "that maybe that's why I don't let people get close. Because if I do, I'll lose them too." The workshop light hummed above us, a quiet reminder of how ordinary the moment looked compared to how extraordinary it felt. I swallowed hard. "You won't lose me." Her head lifted then, and her eyes locked onto mine, sharp, searching, like she was testing whether I really meant it. "You can't promise that," she whispered. I stepped closer before I realized I'd moved. Close enough now to see the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her lips pressed tight to keep steady. "I'm not promising forever," I said carefully. "I'm just saying I'm here. Right now. And I'm not going anywhere." Her breath caught, just barely audible, but enough. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, scrolling for a moment before setting it face up on the counter between us. A photo filled the screen, a young man, smiling wide, hair messy, eyes too alive for the world he'd left behind. I looked at him, then at her, and for the first time, I understood the fear behind her walls. We didn't speak after that. We didn't have to. But when her hand brushed the phone, just the faintest tremor visible, I had to clench my own fists to stop myself from covering it with mine. That tremor, that small, human crack, felt like an earthquake. The shop had long gone dark, except for the single lamp I'd left on by the counter. She sat there, the same stool she always gravitated toward, her coat draped loosely over her lap. It was late, too late for either of us to pretend she'd just stopped by. Neither of us spoke at first. We just sat in that thin pool of yellow light, the hum of the lamp filling the space where words might have gone. It wasn't uncomfortable, though. Not anymore. It felt like we'd both given up pretending the silence meant nothing. She exhaled slowly, staring at her hands. I don't know how we got here. I leaned back against the workbench, watching the slope of her shoulders. Neither do I. There was no challenge in my voice, no defense. Just truth. Her lips pressed into a thin line, as though she wanted to argue, but didn't have the strength for it. She looked tired, yes, but not just from the day. From years. From carrying too much. I moved without thinking, pulling a chair over so I could sit beside her, not across from her. The scrape of wood against concrete was loud, final, like a choice neither of us could take back. She didn't stop me. She didn't shift away. She just let the silence swell around us until it was too heavy to hold. Finally, she turned, eyes meeting mine. Not sharp, not guarded. Bare. I told myself I wouldn't do this. Not again. Not with someone who still has their whole life ahead. Her voice cracked at the end, barely. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to choose the words carefully. Maybe that's why it feels so real. Because it isn't supposed to happen. She let out a shaky laugh, part disbelief, part surrender. God, you make it sound like we don't have a choice. Do we? I asked softly. Her hand twitched on her lap, fingers curling and uncurling like she was testing the idea of reaching for something. I didn't move. I just watched, waiting, heart pounding like it was trying to break through my ribs. After a long moment, she let her hand fall between us, still not touching mine, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin. The smallest, simplest gesture, and it undid me. I turned my palm up, leaving it there, open, not forcing, just waiting. She hesitated, and then, slowly, she let her fingers slip into mine. No words, no grand declarations, just the quiet weight of her hand resting against mine, fragile and certain all at once. We sat like that, side by side in the dim shop, while the world outside went on without us. The rain had stopped, the streets gone still, and for the first time, it felt like neither of us was holding anything back. Not love, not regret, just us. And somehow that was enough. I think about that night more often than I should. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. We didn't kiss. We didn't say the words people are supposed to say when they fall into something dangerous and unexplainable. All we did was sit there, side by side, hands pressed together like we were learning how to trust the world again. But maybe that was enough. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't about grand gestures. It wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about two people, different ages, different stories, who somehow found the same quiet place inside each other. She taught me that love doesn't always arrive loud and obvious. Sometimes it creeps in through silences, through half-finished sentences, and the brush of a hand that lingers longer than it should. It doesn't need to be named to be real. And me? I think I gave her something too. Proof that she could still be seen, still be wanted, without having to carry the weight of someone else's expectations. I never told her she was too old, or too complicated, or too guarded. I just showed up, again and again, and let her decide if that mattered. It did. The funny thing is, I never set out to fall for her. She was supposed to be a customer, just another face in a long line of people who came and went. But she stayed. Or maybe I stayed. Either way, neither of us could pretend it was nothing. We were flawed, awkward, and uncertain. But maybe that's what made it feel human. Sometimes, even now, I replay the first words she ever said to me. Leave me alone. I think about how I should have listened, how maybe things would have been simpler if I had. But then I remember my reply. Only if you stop living in my thoughts. And the truth is, she never did. She still doesn't. That's the afterglow of it all. Not the drama, not the risk, but the memory of finding someone where you least expect it. Someone who makes silence feel full instead of empty. So what did we learn? That love doesn't have to fit the mold. That it can arrive too soon or too late, in the wrong place, with the wrong people, and still mean everything. And maybe that's what I want you to take away from this story. Not that it was perfect, not that it was easy, but that it was real. Because real is rare. And when you find it, even if it scares you, you hold on to it. Even if all you're holding is someone's hand in the quiet glow of a broken-down shop at midnight. If you've ever felt something like that, an unexpected connection you couldn't shake, tell me in the comments. I'd like to know I'm not the only one.